Do you want to sound more professional and confident in business situations? In this video, I'll show you essential business English vocabulary that will help you communicate effectively in meetings, emails, and negotiations. You'll learn how to propose ideas, manage deadlines, give updates, and much more, all in just a few simple expressions. By the end of the video, you'll be ready for any business conversation. So let's get started with our first group of phrases. The first phrases are useful for meetings and discussions. First up, set the agenda. If you set the agenda, you make a plan for what you're going to talk about in a meeting, and usually this is a written or typed document. An example of how to use this phrase in a sentence would be, I've set the agenda for tomorrow's meeting and have sent it to everyone by email. Next, we have kick off the meeting. If you kick something off, it means you start it. For example, I'm going to kick off the meeting by talking about our recent wins. Or if you want to invite someone else to start, you could say, Jennifer, why don't you kick off the meeting? When you change topics in a meeting, you can use the phrase move on to. For example, let's move on to the second point on the agenda. You could also say moving on. Moving on to the second point on the agenda. Make sure you use both prepositions here. Move on to the next point. If you're not sure about something, you might want to clarify details. For example, can we clarify the details on the upcoming project? Or I just want to clarify a few details. If you want to ask someone for an update during a meeting, you can follow up on something with them. For example, I want to follow up on the meeting we had last week by discussing, and then talk about what you want to discuss. Or when you finish talking about a point, you might say to your colleagues, I'll follow up with you next week. So if you are following up with another person, we're using the preposition with. I'll follow up with you next week. If we're talking about the topic, it's on. I want to follow up on the results of last quarter, for example. So follow up with a person, follow up on a topic. The next group of phrases are useful for making suggestions or proposals. The first one is to suggest a solution. If there is some kind of problem at work, you can suggest a solution. This is a useful phrase if you're dealing with problems at work. For example, can I suggest a solution to this problem? Or would anyone like to suggest a solution? Next, you might want to propose an idea. For example, I'd like to propose an idea about how we can improve our customer satisfaction. If you need to make some changes to a plan, you might want to consider alternatives. For example, I think it's time for us to consider alternatives for the next project. Or you could say, I think it's time for us to consider an alternative solution to the problem. You might also explore options. This phrase can be used when you are thinking of different ideas and trying out which one is going to be the best option for you. You're exploring options, you're trying different things, or considering different ideas. Once you've got your suggestions or proposals, then you will take action. For example, my team will be taking action on the points we discussed today. If you want to talk about these actions, you can use the phrase action points. These are the list of things that you have at the end of a meeting, which are the jobs that different people have to do. For example, what are the action points from this meeting? What do we need to do after having this meeting? Another thing you will often have to do in business situations is agree and disagree. Here are some things you can say to make sure you're doing it politely. You might say that you partially agree with someone. If you partially agree, it means that you agree with some of the things they are saying, but not everything. So you might say, I partially agree with what you're saying, however, and then you can give your counter arguments. If you disagree with someone, you might want to raise concerns. For example, I'd just like to raise concerns about the final point that you said. Raising concerns means telling the other person the things that worry you about their idea. When you're having a discussion with work colleagues, it's usually polite to acknowledge the point of the other person. If you acknowledge the point, it means you're letting them know that you heard their idea or you heard their point. For example, I acknowledge the point that you made about our customer satisfaction survey, but I'd just like to add, and then you can add your ideas. If you want to disagree with someone, you can do it respectfully. If you respectfully disagree, it means you disagree, but you want them to know that you are not trying to offend them, you just have a different idea. I respectfully disagree with that because, and if you agree with an idea that someone has suggested, you can support the proposal. For example, I support Ben's proposal for the new project. The next category of phrases is things you can say when you are negotiating, phrases to negotiate and compromise. Something you commonly have to do in business is negotiate terms. If you negotiate terms, you are discussing the policies and procedures that are going to be put in place in a business relationship between two parties. You could use this in the following sentence. Let's set up a meeting for next week to negotiate the terms of our agreement. When you are in a negotiation with someone, you might have to make concessions. If you make a concession to someone, it means you allow them to do or have something just to end the argument or end the negotiation. It might not be something you're entirely happy with, but you do it so that the negotiation can come to a close. For example, we had to make some concessions in the meeting with the client yesterday, but overall we came to an agreement. A common phrase that's used when coming to an agreement with someone is find common ground. If you find common ground, it means you arrive at a place where you both agree. For example, I had a long conversation with the client and eventually we managed to find common ground. We were able to come to an agreement that was good for both of us. Something else you might want to do in a negotiation is offer flexibility. If you offer flexibility, you are saying that you are willing to change some things in order to help the other person. For example, we can offer some flexibility in terms of the pricing for our product, meaning you are willing to make some changes to help the other person out. If you're enjoying this video and finding these phrases useful, please help me out by hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel so you can be informed every time I release a new video like this one. Thank you very much, and now let's get back to our business phrases. Something you often have to deal with in business is deadlines and time management. Here are some phrases you can use for this topic. Prioritize tasks. This refers to deciding which tasks are the most important that you will complete first and which ones are less important and can be done later. For example, you might send an email to your line manager saying, "Can we set up a meeting so that you can help me prioritize my tasks? Help me choose which ones are most important, which ones can wait." Meet the deadline. If you meet the deadline, you complete the task you needed to complete by the time that was agreed or decided between you and the other person. For example, I submitted the report yesterday, so was able to meet the deadline. If you need more time on a project or task, you might ask to extend the deadline. This means making the date that you needed to complete something by a little bit later to give you more time. You might send an email to a colleague saying, "Please could we extend the deadline for this project?" If you are working on something and you are doing it in a timely manner, so it looks like you will finish by the deadline, you can say that you are on track. I'm on track to finish the report by the deadline. Or you could also use this phrase when talking about goals or targets. For example, we're on track to meet our target by the end of this quarter. Finally, when you are finishing a project, you can say that you are wrapping things up. If you wrap something up, it means you are finishing it. For example, I think I should be able to wrap up this project by next week. Or we're looking to wrap up the project by Monday, meaning it will be finished by Monday. The next category of phrases can be used when giving updates or reporting on progress. First, we've got give an update. If you give an update, it means you tell the other person or people how you are doing with the project. You might often have your manager ask you to give an update on your current projects, whatever you're working on. So this is a really common phrase, to give an update. And remember, we use that with the preposition on. For example, can you give me an update on the project? A more formal way of saying that you're going to give feedback is to use the word provide. Can you please provide some feedback on my performance? Or the other way around, let's set up a meeting for next week so I can provide feedback on your performance. The next one, make progress. If you are making progress with something, it means that the task that you are working on is going very well. You're being very productive, you're getting it done, and if it's a project that has a deadline, you're probably going to meet that deadline. For example, I'm making really good progress with the current project. If you have some problems, you might say that you are facing challenges. For example, we faced a few challenges last week, but we're hoping to get back on track today. So there's that phrase again, on track. And if you get back on track, it means that you start to make good progress again after a delay. A phrase that can be used to report good news at work, hit a milestone. If you hit a milestone, it means that you made a significant achievement. You achieved some goal or target. For example, last week we hit a milestone in our sales team, meaning the sales team made a significant amount of money that maybe they haven't made before. They hit a milestone. The next group of phrases can be used when you are closing or summarising a meeting. You might summarise key points. If you summarise key points, you talk about the main points that came out of the meeting, but in a short, concise way. Wrap up is another one that we already talked about earlier. So you can wrap up a meeting, meaning you're ending the meeting. An example of how you might use this, let's wrap things up. If you say that in a meeting, everyone will understand that you are now wanting to finish the meeting. If you want people to give you updates or communicate with you regularly, you can ask to keep in touch. If you say, let's keep in touch, you expect that there will be some communication between you and the other person. Something else you might want to do is touch base. If someone says that they're going to touch base with you, it means they'll have a quick meeting to catch up, to find out some important updates. An example of how you can use this, let's touch base next Friday to talk about our progress. If you touch base, it's not usually a long meeting, just a quick catch-up chat. Finally, at the end of a meeting, you might want to schedule the next meeting. For example, let's schedule the next meeting for Friday afternoon. Our final group of phrases can be used when you are writing emails. This is something you are likely having to do all the time in a business situation. Here are some things you can say. Attach documents. This phrase is used if you are sending documents with an email. For example, I have attached some documents which give more information on our product. You could even say the specific thing you attached. For example, I've attached the report from last Friday's meeting. If you want to tell someone that you received their email, you confirm receipt. For example, I confirm receipt of your email. Or you might say, please confirm receipt of this email, if you want someone to confirm to you that they got your email. Again, we can say follow up. For example, I'm just writing to follow up on our conversation last week. This is a useful phrase if maybe someone hasn't got back to you and you want to give them a little push, a reminder to reply to you. I just want to follow up on, and then say what it is that you are following up on. If you need more information from someone, you can request clarification. For example, I'm writing to request clarification on the 4th point in your email. Finally, if you want to thank someone for replying to you quickly, you can thank them for their quick response. You can also thank them for responding promptly. For example, thank you for responding promptly to my email. Now, these are just a few phrases that you can use in emails, but there are actually so many more. And if you are looking to learn more of these phrases, you can find them in this video.